So I'd like to begin by again saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I won't say good night because you usually say good night as a farewell. And often in England especially, they would say good day as a farewell, although in Australia they'd say it as a greeting. So I'm not sure I can use those, but good whatever time of day it happens to be. And we will begin as usual with the prayers of going for refuge and bodhicitta. So please join me and sing these with, or recite these with faith and devotion and a true feeling of wishing to free yourselves and others from the sufferings of samsara and bringing ourselves and everyone to the state of lasting happiness. O Sanje Chedan Soki Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dane Chapsum Che Dagi Chenyen Gi Pe Senam Gi Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sangye Chedan Sogi Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chapsum Ji Dagi Chenyen Gi Pe Senam Ji Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sangye Chedan Sogi Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chapsum Chi Dagi Chenyen Gi Pe Senam Je Dola Penjir Sanje Dobar Sho until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Samje Tamje Dewa Dan Dewe Judan Dambar Jurje Donga Dan Donga Ji Judan Rawa Jurje Donga Mebe Dewa Tamba Tan Mindrawa Jurje Nirin Shadan Nitan Rawe Tanyon Shambola Nebra Jurje. May all sentient beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be parted from the highest joy, free of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity, free of attachment or hatred for those near or far. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly in my mind as Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Gurus. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. Now think to yourselves that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings with whom we have had strong connections in previous lifetimes, to the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. And in order to do that, we must meditate on the Dharma. And in order to meditate, we need to first listen and contemplate the Dharma. So think to yourselves that this is the stage that we are doing now, and please listen with this motivation of bodhicitta. And the Dharma that we are listening to is the Treasury of Abhidharma, as explained by Vasubandhu, as explained by the ninth Karmapa, Wangchuk Dorje, in his commentary, Youthful Play. And of the 8 chapters of the commentary, of the Treasury, we are speaking about the 7th area, the teachings on wisdom. This area has 4 parts. The teachings on the knowings, the explanation of possession, how the knowings are attained, and the qualities of the knowings. So of these 4 sections, we have completed the first 3, and we're speaking about the 4th, the qualities of the knowings. Or another way of looking at that is the qualities of the beings who have those knowings. And when we're talking about the knowings, they're within a being's continuum. And so when you say we're talking about the knowings, we're talking about the qualities of the Buddhas and of the noble listeners, and also of ordinary individuals who have developed certain levels of meditation and of knowledge. And so that is what we're discussing. Now, with the qualities of the knowing, there are 2 parts, the unshared qualities and the shared qualities. The unshared qualities being the 18 qualities that are unique to a Buddha, which we discussed last week. And so now we are speaking about the shared qualities. Actually, we began the shared qualities in our last class. And the features of the shared qualities has 2 parts. There's an overview and an explanation. The overview mentioning that the shared qualities, those common to Buddhas and the noble listeners, are the unprovocative samadhi, the knowledge from aspiring, and then the 4 unhindered knowledges. And so today we are in the discussion of the 4 unhindered knowledges. But before we begin that, first of all, I need to make an apology and a correction. In responding to a question last week, I told a story of Chenrezig losing his bodhicitta and breaking into 1,000 pieces, and then restoring his bodhicitta and all that. And actually, I told the story a bit wrong. I got 2 stories mixed up and put them both together, which is what happens when you answer a question on the fly without thinking carefully about your sources. So my apologies about that. It was not Chenrezig who met the demon who asked him for his right hand. It was a previous incarnation of Shariputra. So Shariputra met this Mara or demon who asked him for his right hand. And then when the Mara wouldn't accept it, then he lost his bodhicitta. And as a result, did not awaken to Buddhahood, according to some versions of the story. Other people say that actually Shariputra was a Buddha who took that form. However you explain it, that's a different story. With Chenrezig, now I also haven't had the time to go and look up the whole story, but basically Chenrezig had freed an innumerable number of other beings, and then he got discouraged because there was still an infinite number of beings to liberate, and therefore burst into 1,000 pieces. But then he somehow managed to restore his bodhicitta. Perhaps he went to see Amitabha, but we'd have to look up the story to see exactly what it is. At any rate, so that's a different story. So I'm sorry about conflating those 2 stories. And we also have a question that came in this morning, and it says, the question reads, I had a question about meditating in cessation. We have the absorption of cessation. What is the difference between resting in cessation, where mind and mental factors cease and the mind is unmanifest, versus where you think you are resting in the nature of the mind in a blank state? So this, I think, depends on a couple of things. First of all, often when we are in a blank state, we are actually just in a state of torpor and dullness. So you have to make sure when you're meditating that you're not in a state of torpor and dullness, because that could lead you to be in a blank state that actually is not a blank state. You're just actually not aware of the activity that is going on. And this is kind of more likely. for most of us. Another way of doing a blank state would be to enter one of the two absorptions, either the absorption of cessation or the absorption of non-conception. These two are described in more detail at the beginning of the 8th chapter. They're both cessations where, states where the mind and mental factors cease, and you basically just remain in a, from the perspective of the Tibetan tradition, it is just a blank state. From the perspective of the Sutra tradition, it's actually kind of a way to take a rest. You're tired, and then so you rest in the samadhi, the absorption of cessation for a while, and then you can come back and enjoy the further activities. And so here, for the in the context of the Great Exposition, it's taught as something that primarily arhats would engage in after they take a rest. They take a rest for a while before, and then eventually they would enter the state of the nirvana without a remainder, which is very similar to it according to the Great Exposition. In the context of the Mahayana teachings on the absorption of cessation, then basically like bodhisattvas who achieve the 8th bodhisattva level then achieve the ability to rest in the absorption of cessation, but they don't rest for any longer than 7 days, because if they rest too long, they can't do anything to benefit anyone else. So it's a state of rest. From the perspective of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, both are kind of, both that absorption and just regular dullness and so forth is all a bit of a, a sidetrack. Keeps you from actually getting to the state of Buddhahood, because it's kind of basically a place where your mind is stopped. So this will all be discussed in more detail when we get to the 8th chapter in a few days. We're actually coming pretty quickly. So now to turn to the text itself, as I said, we're discussing the 6 qualities. And so the 6 qualities, yesterday we discussed the unprovocative and knowing through aspiration. So today we will be discussing the knowledge, the 4 unhindered knowledges. Now the term unhindered knowledges, there are lots of different translations of this term, as I think I mentioned the other day. Individual distinct awarenesses is a fairly popular one. Analytic awareness is, I believe, what Ian Cochrane translates it as in the ornament of Abhidharma. And there are many other translations. This is one of those terms where the etymology of the word and the actual meaning of the meaning that we're talking about, sometimes it's hard to see exactly how the link goes, and it's not always completely well explained. It's not well explained here. Basically, all 4 of them are unhindered knowledges. They're knowledges that don't have any, and nothing can impede them, unimpeded knowledge, primarily of what's related to speech, and in particular, the speech in terms of teaching the Dharma. But they are sometimes translated as, various other things. So when you hear about the 4 individual distinct awarenesses or so forth, and it's the same thing. This is one of the problems that we have since there is no standard Dharma terminology. So the 4 unhindered knowledges, here we have 3 topics, as it says at the bottom of your screen here. This is on the middle of page 525 of the book. So this has 3 topics: teaching their common features by way of classification, teaching their individual features, and their manner of attainment as a summary. So teaching their common features by way of a classification, here we have the classification, verse 37, the second couplet for line C and D. So likewise, in other words, just like the unprovocative samadhi and the knowledge from aspiration, unhindered knowledge of Dharma, meaning, expression, and eloquence. It means that similar to those, they are produced by unshakable arhats on the support of humans, on a human support. So humans who have achieved the level of unshakable arhats. So the unhindered knowledge of Dharma, meaning, expression, and eloquence, these are the 4 unhindered knowledges. So to read the commentary, the true previous, that is the unprovocative and the knowledge from aspiration are produced by unshakable arhats on the support of the humans of the three continents. And so in the same way, then the four unhindered knowledges are similar in those respects. They are different in other respects. They have different focuses, different levels, and so forth. But in terms of being unshakable arhats on the support of three humans in the three continents, they're the same. So the unhindered knowledges of Dharma, meaning, expression, and eloquence are also similar in those respects. So these are four unhindered knowledges. And here when we talk about Dharma, Dharma is taught in many, the word Dharma has many different meanings. Here, what it refers to is is knowing the Dharma taught by the Buddha, in particular the words of the Buddha. Now, there's a little bit of a debate, is it only the words of the Buddha? But in general, what's important here is the words of the Buddha. As it says in Yashomatri, quotes the words found in many sutras. And so he quotes it from a slightly different sutra, but we also have these same words in the Sutra of Remembering the Three Jewels that we often recite, where it says the true Dharma is good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. Its meaning is excellent. Its words are excellent. It is unmixed. It is utterly complete. It is utterly pure. It is utterly purifying. The Bhagavan taught the Dharma well, and so forth. So it is knowing the Dharma, so in terms of knowing the Dharma teachings. And then meaning is knowing what those words refer to. You know the words of the Dharma, well, what does it refer to? And expression is like knowing how to put it all together into grammatical sentences, and eloquence is being able to express it well. So these are similar as these. So to explain their individual natures, it has 6 points. The nature and focus of the first 3, the 4 dharmas or the 4 qualities of the fourth, the 2 dharmas or qualities of the second, the essence of the first and third, the level of the first, what level the first of these, the unhindered knowledge of Dharma, is on, and the distinctions of the level of the third, that is, unhindered knowledge of expression. So 3 are in order: knowing names, meaning, and speech without obstruction. So knowing without obstruction the names or the words. Now here, this is when we were in the class in Nama Buddha, we spoke about this. The word literally would be translated as name. The Sanskrit word actually is the Sanskrit cognate for the English word name. It's a Sanskrit nama. So nama, yeah, we'd say name, but actually what we mean are the words. So maybe it's better to say words, and probably in a future edition I will correct this. Meaning and speech without obstruction. So knowing these are. So it's explained a little bit more in the commentary here. Their other features are different. So they're the same in terms of being unshakable arhats on human support, but their other features are different. So from the unprovocative and knowledge from aspiration. So to explain those other features, the first 3 unhindered knowings, that is unhindered knowledge of Dharma, meaning, and expression, are in order: knowing names, that is words, the words of the Dharma, meaning, what they're talking about, and speech without instruction. So the word Dharma applies to many different meanings. In fact, I was just as I was saying it and reading the topics, he was talking about dharmas. It can mean like qualities. It can mean like predicates. It can mean anything. But here, in terms of the unhindered knowledge of dharmas, it refers to unobstructedly knowing the collection of names, words, and letters, or the, you could say the names of the words, phrases, and phonemes of the teachings of the Buddha. Unhindered knowledge of meaning is proposed as unobstructedly knowing either all dharmas, that is all phenomena. Here we're using the word in a different term, different meaning. So either all phenomena that can be known, that is the, and not only to know the words for the phenomena, you also know the actual phenomena. And then, so that's one meaning of unhindered knowledge of meaning, and another meaning is knowing the supreme meaning, which is nirvana. So it can have either of those 2 meanings. So basically, not only do you know the words, you know what they're talking about. Unhindered knowledge of speech, or the expression of words. Now, this unhindered knowledge is called by 2 names. It's in both Sanskrit and Tibetan. There are two different names for it. And so one of them is ngitsik, which I've translated as expression, and one of them is as words or speech. As speech, or ngak, or vag in Sanskrit. So unhindered knowledge of speech, or the expression of words, is unobstructedly knowing gender. That is not gender as in people gender, but this is like in many European languages, Indo-European languages, where you have masculine, feminine, and neuter nouns and so forth. Tense of verbs, usage, and other aspects of syntax. In other words, not only because if you're going to speak, if you merely know words, you are going to be like some of my Tibetan friends who know lots of words and put them together with Tibetan syntax. And when they're speaking English, they know many English words. They use lots of, and they put all their English words together in Tibetan syntax. And you're wondering, what are you saying? Even if you speak Tibetan. So you've got to know how to put things together and make sentences. So that's the third aspect. And then the fourth, the unhindered meaning of eloquence. And actually, it's not just eloquence on itself. Eloquence is like being able to, the meaning of the word in English is being able to speak well and speak beautifully and moving, in a way that's moving and so forth. But it also refers to more. Ian Cochran, in his Ornament of Abhidharma translation, translated as unhindered knowledge, or as the analytic knowledge of prowess, of having that. And the Tibetan word is popa. Popa sosa yanda vripa. So popa is like confidence. In any case, here what we're speaking about is the fourth is logical and fluent, clear speech and mastery of the path. So it's got two aspects. There's logical, so it's like it's put together in a right logical order. And fluent, there's no hesitation, there's no stoppages, nothing impeding it, clear speech. And then it is also mastery of the path. So it's those two aspects. So both the speaking, which I think we could say is eloquence, and then the other bit, which is maybe not quite eloquence. So this is another one of those words. It's always hard to figure out the right word to use. Anyways. So that's what we're speaking about here, the fourth, the unhindered knowledge of eloquence. Its focus is on speech and path. It is 9 knowings on all levels. So its focus is either speech or it is the path. And it has 9 knowings, all of the knowings except for cessation of the 10 knowings that we spoke about last week, and it is on all the levels. So the fourth, unhindered knowledge of eloquence, is the logic of the contradictions and connections between meanings. So how do you put them together? And knowing what works and what doesn't, what is contradictory, what is reasonable, what is logical. And it is fluent, clear speech itself. It is unhindered, unimpeded. And through intention on oneself, having unobstructed knowledge of the mastery of the path, by not forgetting the samadhi of tranquility and insight. In other words, shamatha in insight meditation. So it's like not forgetting, being very clear about the shamatha and insight meditation and not forgetting them, even when you're not in meditation. So remembering them. So that's the mastery of the path. The first of these is skill in articulate speech, and the second is skill in attention on oneself. So these are eloquence and also unhindered knowledge. So they are the unhindered knowledge of eloquence. This is telling us how we put the name together. So that is unhindered knowledge of eloquence's focus is speech. So it's thinking about words and letters and speaking and so forth, and the defiled and undefiled paths. So its nature is the 9 knowings excluding the knowing cessation, because when it's focused on speech, it is in desire and the four jhanas, or on 5 levels, because that's where speech can be found, or where speech can be known. And when focused on the path, it is on all 9 of the levels, because the 9 levels can focus on speech. When you're in the formless realm, you can't focus on speech, because there's no speech, as there is no sound, since there is no form in the formless realm. So that's putting it kind of simply. There's actually much more elaborate explanation of this in Yashomitra and the auto commentary, but we don't need to go into all the details now. So that's the fourth of these. And so now if we want to talk about the second has two different, we're talking about two qualities of it, the qualities of what knowings it is and what levels it's on. We've just spoken about that for the fourth. So what are they for the second? Knowledge of meaning is 10 or 6 on all. So the knowledge of meaning, the unhindered knowledge of meaning, is 10 knowings or 6 knowings, and it's on all of the levels. So of the 4 unhindered knowledges, unhindered knowledge of meaning is the 10 knowings if the meaning that is spoken of is all dharmas, or if the meaning of is nirvana. Remember, unhindered knowing of meaning, knowledge of meaning, can either focus on all phenomena, or it can focus on cessation. So if you're talking about it as knowing all phenomena or all dharmas, then it would be all 10 knowings, because that would include relative phenomena, the truths of each of the 4 noble truths, the desire realm and higher realms, and the path and cessation. So that would be all 10 knowings. Or if you're talking about it as meaning nirvana, then it is knowing dharma knowing, subsequent knowing, cessation, extinction, and non-arising, and relative knowing. So it's all 6 of those if it's thinking about nirvana, or focusing on nirvana, I should say. Then unhindered knowledge of meaning is on all the levels. This means that it can be in the desire realm, or in the form realm, or in the formless realm. So the essence of the first and third. So that means we've talked about what levels and what knowings they are and what levels they're on. Well, what about the first and third, the unhindered knowing of dharmas and the unhindered knowing of expression or speech? So they're relative knowing. So the rest, unhindered knowledge of dharma and expression, are relative knowing by nature because they focus on dharma, that is the collection of names and so forth, and speech. So now we know that they're unhindered, so that they're focusing on name and speech. So that's what they're focusing on. So what level are they on? Well, the first, they're on different levels. The first, knowledge of dharma, is in desire and dhyana. Unhindered knowledge of dharma, as it says here in the commentary, is in the desire realm and on the 4 dhyanas, but not above that. It's not on the formless realm. Why is it not on the formless realm? Because there are no collections of names, words, and letters there, or words, phrases, and phonemes, you could say. So, well, what about the level of the 3rd dhyana? That's the unhindered knowledge of speech or expression. Well, of speech, desire, and first. Well, that is on desire and on the 1st dhyana. So the unhindered knowledge of speech or expression is in desire and on the 1st dhyana, but not above, because we're talking about actually speaking. When if you're talking about actually speaking, that speech is inherently motivated by consideration. That's one of the mental factors it's motivated by the 2 mental factors of consideration and examination. As it says in a sutra, the Buddha said, bhikshus, it is through the motivation of consideration and analysis that one speaks. So that means that speech can only happen on those levels where there's consideration and analysis, which means that it would be in desire or on the 1st jhana, but not above. So that's speaking. So I think there's a difference between, you have to make a difference between speaking and then the words and the names and so forth, which can be known on all 4 of the dhyanas, but to actually speak, you need to have that consideration and analysis. So we have these 4, and then they kind of come in order. So the order is that on the basis of dharma or names, that is that the words that the Buddha taught, then through that you can realize the meanings, right? That's what the Buddha taught. He taught so that we could realize what he's speaking about. He doesn't care if we can memorize the words so much. Of course, it's important, but as we have to know what he's talking about. And then on the basis of meaning, then you know the expression, how to put it together and how to say it. On the basis of realizing those, then eloquence is attained. So that's the way they go. But how are they attained? Well, the manner of attainment, as a summary says, if incomplete, they're not attained. In other words, you have to have all of them together. Or when you get them as unhindered knowledge, you get them all together. So here, when we're talking about unhindered knowledge, I mean, I don't think we're just talking about the level of knowledge of some ordinary being who can speak about the Dharma. And an ordinary being might be loquacious or sound convincing or whatever, like myself, but actually not really know what they're talking about. This is but when you get to the level of the unhindered knowledge, this is really knowing the words, really knowing what they're talking about, knowing how to use them and explain them. So these are qualities that they're not just ordinary qualities that someone like us has. So someone like us who can speak eloquently does not necessarily have the unhindered knowledges. So, but now when you attain them, though, you have to have all four of them. So these four come together. When you achieve them all at the same, you get them all at the same time. That doesn't mean that they're all manifest at the same time. For example, some of them you have to be on different levels than the others. For example, when you achieve them, you're on the highest end of the fourth jhanas, which we'll speak about in a moment. And when you're on that level, you attain the unhindered knowledge of speech, but you can't use it until you arise from that and enter the first jhana, because that is, or the desire realm, because that is the level in which you can actually use it. So you achieve it, but it's not necessarily manifest at that point. To actually produce that, then you have to do it on the level that is appropriate for each of those different qualities. So in explaining the features common to all six qualities, so we're talking about all of the six qualities that noble beings, and in particular unshakable arhats, share with the Buddhas. So these six qualities are what they are: the unprovocative, knowledge through aspiration, and the four unhindered knowledges of Dharma, meaning, expression, and eloquence. So to explain the features, the mental support in general. This is the mental support in particular for achieving them. Those six are through the highest end. So those six are the six that I just mentioned. And they're achieved through the highest end of dhyana, which, as I mentioned the other day, is like the greatest development of the fourth dhyana. So the commentary says, those six qualities of unprovocative and so forth are attained through the training of dhyana of the highest end. But they are not necessarily included within the highest end, because as it is said, speech and desire and on the first and so forth. In other words, you gain them through the samadhi of the highest end of the four, or the supreme level, the greatest level of the fourth jhana, but you don't necessarily use them on that, because as we said, speech is in desire and on the first and so forth. So you attain them there, then you produce them on the level where you can actually use them. So now here's the question. We've been mentioning this term, the highest end of dhyana, for the last few days. So what do we mean by this? The distinctions between what is and what is not the actual highest end, the actual highest dhyana. It's sixfold. The fourth dhyana's highest end has 6 parts. It is unprovocative samadhi, knowledge through aspiration, 3 of the unhindered knowledges, and the highest end alone. So it's sixfold in nature. So it's not including one of the unhindered knowledges, and it's not including the unhindered knowledge of expression. As it says here, although unhindered knowledge of expression is attained through the power of the fourth dhyana, it is not on the level of the fourth dhyana. In other words, because it is speech and expressing, it is on the levels of desire in the first jhana, where there is consideration and analysis. On the fourth jhana, there's no consideration or analysis, so there is no expression there. But you can't get this unhindered knowledge unless you achieve that highest end. So you achieve it through that, but it is not actually part of that. So it is so the highest end has these 6 parts itself: unprovocative samadhi, knowledge through aspiration, and the other 3 of the unhindered knowledges: knowledge of the knowledge of dharmas, the knowledge of meanings, and the unhindered knowledge of eloquence. So, and the unhindered knowledge of expression is just like an emanated mind of desire is attained by the actual dhyana, but it is not the actual dhyana. In other words, as we'll speak about with the clairvoyances, when you achieve the dhyanas, you achieve the 6 clairvoyances, and one of the abilities is to make a mind of emanation that then can create emanations. And if you want to create an emanation in the desire realm, you go from you achieve the clairvoyant power on the dhyanas, and then you create a mind of emanation and desire, and then make emanations from that. So it's kind of like a two-step process for the emanation. So similarly here, you achieve the meaning of eloquence, the capability for it on the highest ending of on the highest end of the fourth jhana, but you don't actually manifest it until you enter the level of the first jhana. So what is this high end of the fourth? Identifying the highest end of the fourth jhana. It is jhana's end gained by progressing through all levels, coming to the highest development. So this highest end of dhyana is a special. It's the particular upper limit or upper end of this, because it is gained by progressing through all the levels from desire to the peak of existence, entering the absorption of each level in forward and reverse order. In other words, what it means is that someone who wants to enter this, it's kind of like practicing your scales on a musical instrument. You have to get really good at practicing your scales before you can actually have mastery over your instrument. So similarly, when you're doing the dhyanas and the absorptions, you have to be really good at practicing your scales. You start in desire, then you go to the first jhana, then you go to the second jhana, and then you go to the third jhana, and the fourth jhana. Then you go up to the fifth jhana, this is the first formless, and the second formless, third formless, and the fourth formless. And then you go back down from the fourth level of formless, the neither conception or non-conception, into the third, nothingness, then down into the second, infinite consciousness, and then down into the first, infinite space. And then from that down into the fourth jhana, down to the third, down to the second, down to the first, and back down to the desire realm. And then you go back into the jhanas, up the first, second, third, and fourth, until you've come to the fourth jhana, and then you can come to the end. And it's kind of like compatible with the fullest event, the highest end of all of these. So it is compatible with all of them, because you've gone through all of these levels, and then it's like the most compatible with that is the highest end of the dhyanas. It has come through the lesser, medium, and greater, or to the highest development, and it is even higher than that. It has arrived at the extreme upper limit of the fourth jhana. It is like a fourth alternative. Now, this fourth alternative is mentioned in all of the commentaries, but it doesn't exactly say what it is. Basically, when you have a fourth alternative, you can have there's something that is, when you have two phenomena you evaluate are the same, when you have two different categories, there's something in one category, the second category, and third, and the third category, or the four, or is it neither? Is it in both, or is it neither? And so here it's like saying it's in neither. It's kind of like beyond everything, I think is what this is saying. But it's not particularly clear in any of the commentaries exactly what he means by this fourth alternative. So the particulars of its training. So how do you get this high end of jhana, or these six qualities? When they are in the continuum of those who are other than the Buddha, that is these six, the unprovocative and the unprovocative, the knowledge through aspiration, the three of the four unhindered knowledges, and then the the highest ends of dhyana are reason for training. They are not attained by mere detachment. In other words, you have to train to get them unless you're a Buddha. So you can't just say, I want to do them. You actually have to do them. It's like if you want to become a virtuoso on a musical instrument, you have to practice. Well, it's the same if you want to become a virtuoso meditator. You have to practice. So they are not attained by mere detachment. In other words, if you have just managed to free yourself from samsara and achieve the level of arhat, free from all levels of samsara, you do not necessarily have this. You actually have these six qualities. You actually have to go through the training. But the Buddha is different. He accomplishes them without depending on training, but by merely wishing, because he is the master of all qualities. This is the benefit of going through 3 uncountable eons of gathering the accumulation of merit, because then you don't have to train as hard in your last lifetime. Okay, so those are the qualities that a Buddha shares with the noble listeners. But there are also qualities of a Buddha that other ordinary beings can limit. And in particular, they are the 6 clairvoyances. So to go through this topic, those qualities common to the both noble and ordinary individuals. And this has two topics. One second. So those common to noble and ordinary individuals has two topics: the distinctions of their qualities and understanding their features. So what are they? What are these qualities? Well, the distinctions of the qualities has four topics: their classifications, their essence, the distinctions of dharmas, and how they're attained. So what we're talking about with these shared qualities are these six clairvoyances. So the verse reads, "Sixfold clairvoyance manifests magic, the ear, mind, knowing previous lives, death and rebirth, and knowing extinction." So we've got six clairvoyances. Now, the word clairvoyance, in many other translations, they call these as, what do they call them? Super knowing or super knowledges. That's one. Sometimes they're called higher knowings and so forth. But actually, they're all talking about things that in just ordinary English, we'd say, oh, you're clairvoyant. If someone says, I can read other minds, then someone's going to say, oh, you're clairvoyant. If someone says, I can tell the past and future, you can say, are you clairvoyant? That's just the way we normally speak in English. Now, of course, people will object to this and say that clairvoyance is actually really only one of these six. But it applies to, in conversation, we actually use it for the several that we talk about. So I use it for the whole kit and caboodle, just as all this is what we would call applying the name of one to the general, applying the name of a particular to the universal in terms of the ways of naming things. So sixfold clairvoyance manifests magic, the ear. So magic means the magic of being able to move, make emanations, do all sorts of supernatural things. This word that I translated as magic here, chotul, or zutul, I'm not, even when I did this translation, I was not convinced of it totally. But it's hard to like figure out a way to say it. It's sort of like supernatural powers is how Ian Cochran talks about it. But magic implies that you are doing, spells and getting things together and casting spells, which it's not. It's actually kind of like supernatural power. So supernatural is probably better. So sixfold clairvoyance manifests magic or the supernatural. It also manifests the divine ear. The divine ear is being able to hear things that are far away or that are close without any difference. So being able to things that are beyond the range of hearing of an ordinary hearing, a human ear. So this is called the divine ear. The mind means telepathy. It's the knowing others' minds or telepathy that we have been speaking about already. And so what we mean by telepathy here in particular is that you want to know what someone's thinking. And so the way this works is that you observe their body and then think from their body, what must they be thinking about that? And then from that step, you go to actually knowing. So that way you can tell, is their mind desirous? Do they have hatred in their mind? Have they attained the paths? Do they have consideration? Do they have analysis? What is their mind like? So you first observe the body, and then from that you move to the level of knowing their minds telepathically. So that is how this is said to work. So knowing previous lives. So this is really knowing where you were born in previous times. Like there are plenty of stories, and this is either for yourself or for someone else. There are many stories in the Buddhist literature, and particularly in the Vinaya, where the Buddha would tell the stories of some person. In fact, in the Vinaya, it's like every section of the Vinaya, there's a story, the Buddha makes a rule, or gives a procedure for how something should be done. And then the monks, the bhikshus say, and how is it that this happened? And then the Buddha will tell the story of the miscreant who did the terrible deed that made him do a rule or make a rule or whatever. He'll tell his or her, because some of the nuns were miscreants too. The monks were, some of the monks, you had this, the gang of 6. Among the nuns, what was it? How many were there? And there's one in particular whose Sanskrit name I don't remember, but whose Tibetan name is Bomgalmo. And she was just got into all sorts of problems. So, someone like that would do something, and the Buddha will say, well, in a previous life, he or she did this. And that's why this happened now. So that is like knowing that. So knowing for others, but also the Buddha was able to know his own previous lives. So how does this knowing previous lives work? Well, Yashomitara explains what happens is that when you know a mental consciousness that has ceased, and then from that, you can know the previous ones that have ceased and work backwards to knowing a previous life. So you know the one that has just ceased, and by knowing that, then you kind of work backward to knowing a previous life. And as you get better, then you're able to know not just one life, but like a succession of lives. Then as this power develops, then you're able to kind of skip over and know lives. At first you have to go from one life and then knowing the previous life and then knowing the one to that. So like knowing 1 life ago, then 2 lives ago, then 3 lives ago. Eventually you can go from like knowing 3 lives ago to knowing 10 lives ago and so forth as this power develops. So that is how this particular power is said to develop. And then death and rebirth is knowing when you or another being dies, where are you going to go? And knowing extinction is knowing the extinction of all defilements, knowing that this is the truth of suffering, this is the truth of origin, I have abandoned, this is the truth of cessation and path, I have abandoned all of these defilements and they're truly gone and so forth, knowing extinction. So those are the 6 clairvoyances. These are the mind of liberation. So when we talk about the different types of minds, we've talked about the minds being either paths of no obstructions or paths of liberation are the 2 primary ones that we speak about. So of these are paths of liberation. They're knowing, recognizing. Now in the auto commentary, actually it says, the verse says they're minds of liberation. The auto commentary says that they're like minds of liberation. In other words, the way it's explained again in Yashomitara is that when you achieve these, if you achieve them through training, there's a moment of non-obscuration where you then achieve them, and then you're free of that. That's the liberation. It's similar to the results of the spiritual path that we spoke about in the previous chapter. As you eliminate each obscuration through a path of no obstacles, then in the next moment you have the liberation, knowing that you're free of it. And so it's the same way. You're free of something, you're liberated for it. So they're similar to the paths of liberation. So the distinction of dharmas, we want to know the various qualities of these. And so in order to know what qualities, being the Abhidharma, we have to fit them into the various different categories we've already spoken about. And the first is, which of the 10 knowings are they? The 4 are knowing, what knowings they are. The 4 are knowing the relative, and knowing minds is the 5 knowings. Clairvoyance of extinction is like power, it's like the power. So the 4, that is other than the 3rd and 6th. So this would be the, oh no, I'm not, look, I have to go through this. We'd have to have the power of extinction, what do we say? Also the power of miracles, the power of, we have the, I'm just going to look at this so I don't do it wrong, because otherwise I'm going to get myself close. It's the power of manifesting magic and the ear, and then also the knowing death and knowing death and rebirth and knowing previous lives. These 4 are relative knowing. Why is that? So the 4, other than the 3rd and 6th, the 3rd is telepathy and the 6th is knowing extinction. So the other 4 are only knowing the relative because they are always defiled. In other words, when you think about like magic or the supernatural, what you're doing is you're like moving things physically. So you're thinking about physical things. And so those are defiled. And so that's relative knowing. With the divine ear, you are hearing sounds and so forth on the level of either desire or on the form realm. And so on the first level of form. And so that these are And so these are defiled. So it's got to be relative knowing, as are knowing your previous places. When you're thinking about when you know your previous places, then you're knowing what? I was born in this sort of a family, in this sort of a country, and I had this length of a lifetime. Well, all of that is relative stuff. So that's relative knowledge. And the similar with the knowing the future, knowing future lives. So then the clairvoyance of knowing other minds is 5 knowings. It's Dharma knowing, subsequent knowing, path knowing, telepathy or knowing other minds, and relative knowing. It's any one or a combination of those 6. Clairvoyance of knowing extinction of defilements is like the power of knowing the extinction of defilements. It either is 6 or 10 knowings, and it is on all 11 levels. So it can be any of 6 knowings, all the knowings that can know cessation, or you could consider it all 10 knowings. And on all 11 levels, so this would be desire plus the, desire, the preparations for the undefiled preparations for the first jhana, the 4 jhanas plus the special jhana, that's already gets us up to 7. And then we have the 4 of formless, and so that is 11 levels. So of these, then 5 of these are on the 4 jhanas. The first 5 clairvoyances are on each of the 4 actual jhanas. So that means that they are on the 4, so the first, second, and third, the actual jhanas is where you need to be to generate them. Clairvoyance of divine eye and ear are only on the level of the first jhana. But in terms of how they are attained and their support, they're explained to be on 4. This is similar to what we were speaking about a few moments ago with the unhindered knowledge of speech, where it's only on the first, it's only manifested on the first jhana, even though it's attained through the 4th. Similarly here, you can attain these clairvoyances through the 4 jhanas, but when you manifest them, then you have to do it on the first jhana. Now, the clairvoyance of divine eye, this is another name for knowing death and rebirth. So divine eye doesn't mean, it's not the same as divine ear is where you can hear sounds that are beyond the limit of your sensory perception. Divine eye does not mean the same thing with the eye. It means knowing your future rebirths. So that's a distinction in the term, but it's called the divine eye. So knowing where you or another being are going to be reborn in the next, in your next or future existences. So what spheres are they on? Or what their spheres are, excuse me. So spheres means their object. What are their objects? Their object is own and lower level. So their object, the object of these jhanas, of these clairvoyances, are phenomena that are on their own dhyana, or own level, or lower, not on higher. So these, the 5 clairvoyances, all of the 5 clairvoyances, except for the clairvoyance of knowing extinction, their object is on their own level or lower levels, but the higher levels are not their object, because the superior is not the object of the inferior. This is also discussed earlier when we're talking about the faculties and so forth in the first 2 chapters. The mind can know, the mind of one level can know lower levels, but not higher levels, because they're superior to it. They're beyond its range. So what we're saying here is that when you have the knowledge of, what do we say? Well, the first one, the knowledge of the supernatural knowledge, or the knowledge of magic, that you can be, if you're on the level of 4th jhana, then you could know the 3rd, do the emanations for the 3rd, 2nd, the 4th, 2nd, 3rd, 1st, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, or 1st jhana, or on the level of desire, because you can know either your own level or lower levels. Similarly with the other ones, knowing the divine ear, of course, you have to be on the first, with the divine ear, you would be on the first jhana to hear, but you could also hear sounds of the lower levels. You wouldn't be able to hear sounds of higher levels. So therefore, the object of clairvoyance of magic is knowing how to go or make emanations on its own or lower levels, but not on the higher. So you're on the first jhana. and you decide to make an emanation. You want to emanate yourself as a squid. For whatever reason, you have a good reason to emanate yourself as a squid. You can make yourself a squid in the level of desire. If there are squids in the level of form, you could make yourself a squid on the level of form, but there are no squids because there are no animals, so forget it. You can emanate yourself as some sort of a being on the first level of form. But if you're on the first level of jhana, you can't make yourself into a being of the second, third, or fourth jhanas. And the others are similar. The familiar is so how they are attained. The familiar is attained by detachment. So if you developed these in the past and they're familiar to you, then the moment you achieve detachment from a level, then you can achieve the clairvoyances. Otherwise, you got to work. You got to do the practice. You got to actually make the effort to develop these qualities. So as far as the manner of attainment of the clairvoyances, those that are not familiar from previous closed paths must be attained through training. In other words, if you have not already developed them in the past and then lost them, then you have to train. But the familiar, that which you've already trained, such as in previous lives, is attained merely by detachment. In either case, manifesting them depends on training. So even if you have attained them because of being familiar, when you actually want to do them, you've actually got to put effort into it. You can't just sort of like say, boom. You have to actually go through the process of developing it. Such as I explained for the process of telepathy. You have to go through the process of observing someone's physical form, thinking about what their mind might be, and then knowing it. It's like this sort of process that goes through there. Similar with the other ones, you have to go through the process. So now to speak about them, that's kind of speaking about them in terms of their qualities, of what levels and knowings they are, and so forth, how they're achieved. Well, what about their particular features? So understanding their features, there are two topics. Understanding the common features and understanding their particular features. So for the common features, we have four topics. Their intersection with the four mindfulness foundations of mindfulness. So which foundations of mindfulness they are. Their intersection with virtue and so forth. Their intersection with the three knowledges, and their intersection with the three different types of miracles. So the intersection with the foundations of mindfulness, the third one, that is what? That is telepathy, isn't it? The third one is the three foundations, and magic, eye, and ear are the first. So the third one, telepathy, is the three foundations of mindfulness. The mindfulness of feelings, formations, feelings, dharma, feelings, mind, and dharmas. And the other three, the clairvoyances of magic or supernatural, the divine ear and the divine eye, are the first. The mindfulness of body. Because it focuses on mind and mental factors, the third one, clairvoyance of knowing minds, is contained within the three foundations of mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of dharmas, right? Because that's what it's observing. And then the three clairvoyances of magic or supernatural and of the divine ear and of the divine eye are the first foundation of mindfulness of body because they focus on form. They're focusing on physical form, and that is contained within the first foundation of mindfulness, mindfulness of body. The focus of the clairvoyance of magic is the four external sense bases, excluding sound. So they're external sense bases, which means not part of the body. And the focuses of the consciousness of the divine ear and the divine eye are the sense bases of sound and form. So that's saying which of the four foundations of mindfulness are they? And that kind of gives us an idea of what their focuses are, what they're observing. So now, are they virtue or neutral or non-virtue or what? So that's their intersection with virtue and so forth. The clairvoyance of ear and eye are neutral. The rest are virtue. So the clairvoyance, you might think that when we have a quality of the Buddha and so forth, that it must be virtuous. Not necessarily. They can also be neutral. The clairvoyance of eye and ear are neutral. The rest are virtue. So why is it that the clairvoyance of eye and ear and eye are neutral? The clairvoyances of divine eye and divine ear are not afflicted, but they are also not included within the four virtues, so they are unobscured neutral. It's kind of like a sensory consciousness, right? It's not really, it's neutral. So but these are unobscured neutral. These two are full knowing, that is progeny, that is concurrent with the eye and ear consciousnesses. So they're concurrent with the consciousness, and so they're associated with that sensory consciousness. But the other four, the four rest, are virtuous. They're solely virtuous. So their intersection with the three knowledges. Now, these three knowledges are the three non-learners' knowledges. These are knowledges that non-learners have. They're not, these are different than the 10 knowings. These are three knowledges of the non-learners. So this has two topics. It has an overview and an explanation. So the overview reads, oh, what happened there on my screen? I hope you're not seeing that. I don't think you are. Okay. Three are knowledge because they stop the ignorance of prior lives, etc. So three of these 6 clairvoyances are called the non-learner's knowledge. And the reason why they're called the knowledge of the non-learners is because they stop the ignorance of prior lives and so forth. Now, prior lives actually should be, I believe this is a mistake. I need to research it a little bit more. But I think that actually what it's saying is that the idea that there's an initial beginning, an initial start. You think that I must have had a beginning. There had to have been a first. There must have been a first one. There must have been a first lifetime. There must have been a beginning point to me. So that's that. Another of the ignorances is the ignorance of thinking about future lives, not understanding future lives, or they are ignorance, or they remove ignorance about the present. So that's what we mean by the etc. So the three clairvoyances of knowing previous places, knowing death and rebirth, and the extinction of defilements are called the three non-learners' knowledges. So why these three? Why are we picking them? There are 6 of them. Why are we only picking 3? It's because these 3 give knowledge that non-learners, need, or that they need to have about knowing the nature of things. So why is it only these 3 and not the others, you ask? The reason is because, respectively, they stop the totally deluded ignorance of prior lives, or the idea that there is a beginning point, and so forth, including future lives in the present. In other words, you have no more ignorance about there being like some initial point before which you didn't exist, a time when you start to exist, realizing that there's a beginningless sequence of lives, realizing that there's an endless sequence of future lives if you do not achieve nirvana, and that ignorance about the present, not understanding the present. So the explanation of this has 3 points. The first is the ultimate non-learner's knowledge. The last one is non-learners. That is the true non-learner's knowledge. It's by its very essence, the knowing the clairvoyance of the extinction of defilements. When you have that, you're definitely a non-learner. It's the non-learner's knowledge only. So of those, the last one, the clairvoyance of the extinction of defilements, since it is undefiled, is both non-learner and also non-learner's knowledge. So it occurs on the level of a non-learner only, and it is a non-learner's knowledge. So it is both of these together. The other 2 can also happen when you were a learner, but they're called by the name non-learner's knowledge. And to explain why, the topic says the reason why the other 2 are called by that term, non-learner's knowledges. When 2 others arise in their mind stream, they're so called. When the other 2, that is knowing previous lives and knowing prior lives and previous places and knowing death and rebirth, occur in the mind stream of a non-learner, then they are called non-learner's knowledge. So the defiled first and second are not non-learner by essence. But when these 2 others arise in there, that is in the non-learner's mind stream, they are so called. They're called non-learner's knowledge. When they occur in the mind stream of a non-learner, of an unshakable arhat or so forth, who has the knowledge of non-arising, then they are non-arising and extinction. Then they are non-learner's knowledge. So the elaboration here is, although the learners may have these, their streams have ignorance. So these are not called knowledge. So you might ask, well, why wouldn't the knowledge of previous, learners can also have these two clairvoyances, so why can't we call them at that stage a learner's knowledge? The reason why you can't call them learner's knowledge at that point is that they still have ignorance. They don't really fully know. So why are those clairvoyances not called learner's knowledge, you ask? Although the detached learners may have these two. In other words, once you have detached yourself from desire and achieved the dhyanas, you can develop these clairvoyant powers, including the knowledge of previous places and of death and rebirth. But at that point, your mind stream still has ignorance. So they are not called knowledge in the sutras. This is the term. It's just a different term. And so then their intersection with three miracles, and this is the reason why I use the word magic, is because we have two different words, the miracles and magic, supernatural and miracles. What do we do? So the three different types of miracles, the first, third, and sixth are miracles. So of these clairvoyances, the first, magic or supernatural, and the third, knowing other minds and telepathies, and the sixth are the three types of miracles. So this is in the Sanskrit, the term riddhi. It's like so basically a miraculous power. These are respectively the miracles of magic, the miracles of addressing someone, and the miracles of teaching. So like the first one, the miracle of magic, it's like being able to, what do we say? It's being able to, you want to turn yourself into a lion, you turn yourself into a lion. You want to turn yourself into a mouse, you can turn yourself into a mouse. You want to emanate a mouse separately from yourself, you can do it. It's just like doing all these magical things. Or if you want to fly in the air, you can fly in the air and so forth. These are all the powers of the supernatural or magical powers that you can develop through the clairvoyances and through the dhyanas. The miracle of addressing, here this means when you see someone and they say, hey, your mind is like this. And you see someone, then you say, oh, your mind has that. So these first two, they're like really impressive. People see them and like, wow, they really impress them. That's kind of why they're called miracles. Is like people are astonished when you can read their minds or when you can do these fantastic things with your body. But there's the third miracle, is the miracle of teaching the Dharma, and this is considered the greatest of the miracles. Identifying the supreme among these, the miracle of teaching is best, since it is unconfused and brings benefit and a pleasant result. So if you want to be able to, if you want to impress your friends and family reading minds and doing miracles, if you want to impress your family, you don't have a virtuous mind, and so you're going to lose your miraculous powers. Like the story of Devadatta that I told last summer. So of these three, the miracle of teaching is best, since it arises only from the extinction of afflictions, and thus it is from a good cause. So it's a pure cause. It only comes from a good cause, because it is unconfused. You're fully free of confusion and ignorance. It's unmistaken, in other words. And the other reason is that it brings the benefit of freeing beings from afflictions in this life and bringing futures to a pleasant fruit or a good result of being entirely free of suffering in the future. So the other two are not like that. Now, the other two are important, actually, for bodhisattvas and for Buddhas and for great beings when you want to teach the Dharma. These are actually very frequently spoken about in terms of being qualities that we need in order to teach the Dharma, particularly the quality of telepathy. You need to be able to know other people's dispositions. You need to be able to know what they think about what they want in order to be able to teach a Dharma that is appropriate to that. Otherwise, you might be in a position where you're teaching them Dharma that is actually, it might be fine Dharma according to the teachings, but it's not the right Dharma for that person. If you don't know their mind, you might just be giving them the wrong medicine. The Dharma of doing miracles can also be important for inspiring faith in other sentient beings. For example, the Pratyeka Buddhas have these miraculous powers, but they don't teach the Dharma. Still, they benefit beings by displaying their miracles and inspiring faith in other sentient beings. And so this is also said to be a very important quality. So these are the three different types of miracles, the Riddhi in Sanskrit, the best of the best of the most miraculous of the six clairvoyances. And among them, it's teaching the Dharma is the best one. So that, I think, is enough. I think it's actually a really important thing to keep in mind when we think about it, because sometimes we might, what do we say, think to ourselves that wouldn't it be great to do this or that, or be able to benefit people, have these powers and so forth. I mean, we're ordinary beings, and so we're going to come up with these stupid ideas about things like that. We have to remember what's most important. Or we might be impressed. You read stories about Milarepan. What's more impressive? The fact that he developed the ability to fly through the air? Okay, so he was seen flying through the air by a couple of farmers, a father and a son. And the father said, oh, there's that horrible Milarepa. And the son said, wow, look at him, he can fly, and felt faith. So even that didn't necessarily help. But when he taught the Dharma, who did it help? And we're still receiving his teachings. And we've got, I mean, there are translations of these that we can read in English, probably in Chinese too. There's the newer translation in English, which is really quite nice. We can read them and be inspired still. That teaching of Dharma that Milarepa did, as far as outweighs his miraculous powers, his other powers to do that. When you think about the Buddha, I mean, the Buddha did performed the miracles in Shravasti on the Festival of Miracles. And this is an incredible thing that he managed to do. It must have been just totally impressive to everyone who was watching them. But right now, those are just stories that we read. When we read the words of the sutras, and when we think about the words of the sutras or the Vinaya or whatever other words the Buddha taught, those are the ones that are still benefiting us now, 2,500 years, 2,600 years, maybe 2,600 years later. So it's really this miracle of teaching that's really important. And we can also think about it, Shantideva. Shantideva, in the Tibetan tradition, they talk about how great a being he was, and they tell about all the miraculous things that he does. And when you tell that to a group of people who have had a Western education, they go, yeah, right, that's just a myth. When you read the words, when you look at the words, some of them say, yeah, it's nice, but what? So what? Some of them go like, wow. But people saying, wow, he was able to fly in the air when he recited the 9th chapter? People are skeptical. So it's, especially in this day and age, it's these teachings of the words of the Dharma, the actual Dharma teachings that are so important and so beneficial for us. So let's see, I think that we have a question here. What do we say? When we know a place from another life, as in the way we know a place without having been there in this life, yet it exists and we see this knowing either when we dream it or when we actually go there by seeing images, this is clairvoyance. Experience, can this benefit the direct acceptance of rebirth? Well, I think this seems to be a question about when we have like somehow vague memories of previous lives that come back to us through various conditions, such as being in a place where we may have been in a previous life. I think this is a little bit different than the clairvoyance in terms of its development. It's kind of a vague thing. Now, there are children who actually, it's not uncommon among children, especially before they get to a certain age, to have the ability to remember previous lives. And there is a lot of literature on this. What's the name of the author? There is a book that came out a few years ago about that talked about students who, what do we say? About children who remember their previous lives. And actually, it was a psychologist who was just doing like one of those studies where they go and interview people and ask questions and they do everything in their scientific way. or psychological, they do their psychological study way, the academically accepted way, to determine are these reliable or not. So they're children who remember this. So it does come naturally. But I'm not sure that that rises to the level of clairvoyance. Now, there are times when it is clairvoyance and it arises naturally. For example, when you are in the bardo and you have the ability to read others' minds, that's considered telepathy. Also, some beings in the God realms also have powers of like divine ear. That's why it's called divine ear, right? So these powers can arise through birth. In certain levels, but they're a little different than the qualities that we develop through the path. And so I think that's, as it says here, that they can be achieved through what do we say? They have to be manifested through training. You have to try to do it if they're going to be a clairvoyance. Other than that, I think that when there's a clairvoyance, you're not knowing something that is totally inaccessible to your mind. Otherwise, there'd be no way you could know it. I think it's more an instance of we ordinary beings have so many obscurations to our minds that we're just not aware of all of the different levels of our experience. So I think that is enough for today's class. I might think about that a little bit overnight. Now, tomorrow is the Festival of the Wheel of Dharma, so no class tomorrow. Any of you in France may enjoy Bastille Day or whatever other holiday, maybe it's a holiday wherever you are, or at least you can celebrate the end of the Tour de France or whatever other sporting event you want to, I don't know. Why am I recommending sporting events? It's just something that I think some of you might be interested in. It's actually completely meaningless. Completely meaningless. Why bother? But so are national holidays. They're completely meaningless in the long run. Anyways, if you're going to enjoy them, fine. I see we have a question actually from one of our Zoom people. So I
will actually have a question about tomorrow. Is the text going to be scrolled on the screen for the practices tomorrow? The text.
Okay, so tomorrow for the, what we will be doing is here at the Trango Monastery in Canada is we will be reciting the Sutra of the Fortunate Eon, which means what we'll do is we'll take the sutra, which is a big, long sutra, and I think there are going to be like 5 or 6 of us reading it. And maybe more. I don't know who's going to show up or how it's going to work. And we're each going to be given a stack of pages. So we're all going to be reading from different pages at the same time. This is kind of the Tibetan tradition of when you read the sutra. So we all together actually read the entire sutra, but there's not going to be like any text to go through. Now, I suppose I should have looked online on the 84,000. You should take a look on 84,000 and see, is there a copy of it there? And if there is, it's a good idea to take that and to read as much of it as you can. It's a long sutra. So whether you'll be able to get through it an entire day, if you can read in English as fast as Nyempa Rinpoche can read in Tibetan, you're fine. Otherwise.
Thank you.
You can also choose any sutra that you want to read. And there are many different sutras up on the 84,000 website now. So you can pick whatever length sutra fits the amount of time you have to read. And the more time you spend, obviously, the more merit, as long as you have a good motivation.
Thank you. Just sometimes the text is scrolled, but that's good. And there's an English translation, but that's perfect. Thank you so much. Just wondered.
Okay, you're welcome. So now let us dedicate the merit of teaching and listening to the Dharma to the benefit of all sentient beings, so that they may all, achieve the supreme state of freedom from samsara, liberation. Excuse me, wrong one. So that all sentient beings may achieve the state of freedom from samsara, and until such time as they do, may they be free of all the temporary sufferings of birth and aging, sickness and death. O sanam de tam je se pani to 없는 예배라나 밤새되 개가나지 발롱초바이 시베톨레로 그녀로쇼. By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and free all beings swiftly from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Chanchup senjo rinpoche ma ke panam ke jure chi ke pa nyamba me bar yang gong ne gong de pelwar sho. May bodhicitta, great and precious, arise in those who have not roused it, never weakening in those who have. May it grow ever stronger and stronger. Thank you very much. And we will resume day after tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.